Imagine a quiet morning when the noise of the world has finally settled. You sit there, your breath slowing down, and you realize someone is sitting in front of you. They do not rush to speak, they do not interrupt, they do not try to fix anything in you. They simply sit there like a still lake, reflecting your image exactly as it is. Nothing more, nothing less. Their silence is not emptiness, but a space where you can simply be yourself. In that gentle gaze, you feel your shoulders soften, your heartbeat return to its natural rhythm, and something within you begins to ease. In a world where everyone is competing to speak, meeting someone who truly listens is a miracle. They do not use words to persuade you, they use presence to heal. It is not that they have answers for everything, but that they do not need to prove anything at all. Their calmness becomes a mirror that reveals the deepest layers of emotion within you, the parts you often hide away. That is the true nature of empathy, not an intellectual understanding, but the ability to touch another soul without judgment. Notice how, in the moment someone truly sees you, not to fix or to evaluate, a quiet light begins to spread. That light connects two souls through an invisible thread of acceptance. When you feel it, you no longer need to try to become someone else to be loved. You simply need to be present and to be seen. From the deepest place within, that is what Emmet Fox meant when he said that true understanding does not come from collecting facts, but from releasing judgment. Only when the heart is quiet enough can we hear the voice of the soul within ourselves and within others. Non-judgmental understanding is the foundation of trust. Empathy is not a performance. It does not come from sweet words of comfort or exaggerated gestures. Its power lies in calm and genuine presence. A truly understanding person does not try to prove anything, nor do they rush to fill the silence. They simply exist, and that very presence changes the atmosphere in the room. You can feel it when judgment leaves the space. There are no more defensive walls, no more searching eyes. Instead, there is a lighter, warmer air where people are allowed to breathe freely and speak what they truly feel. The absence of judgment is not weakness. It is the sign of a mind trained to observe without rushing to conclude. When you stop measuring others by your own standards, you open the door to trust. That trust does not need promises or declarations. It arises naturally, like the warmth of the sun after the rain. People can feel that with you. They do not need to protect themselves. They do not need to hide their fear or pretend to be strong. That sense of safety is the foundation of every lasting relationship. However, to understand without judging, you must begin within yourself. Every judgment you project outward is born from the condemnation you still hold inside. When you have not forgiven yourself, you cannot fully accept anyone else. That is why the path of empathy always begins with releasing self-blame, comparison, and expectations that have locked your heart. Only when your heart is free from those burdens can you make room to receive others as they are. Take a moment to observe your day. How many times in silence do you make assumptions about someone just from their tone or appearance? How many times do you close a door in your heart simply because they do not act as you would like? These small moments quietly build distance. But when you learn to pause, take a deep breath and say to yourself, I choose to understand before I judge, you are laying the first brick for the bridge of trust. Trust is not created by words. It is created by the energy people feel when they are near you. If judgment still speaks within you, they will sense it in your eyes, in your breath, in the smallest tension of your body. But when your heart is truly still, you become a safe place, a piece of ground where others can lay down their fears without being hurt. Non-judgmental understanding is a practice, not a state reached once and for all. Every day, we are tested when someone says something that hurts us, when we disagree, when we see weakness or mistakes in others. In those moments, the lesson is revealed. If you choose to listen instead of react, to observe instead of criticize, you are planting seeds of trust. Those seeds grow over time, and one day you will find yourself standing in the middle of a storm, yet still at peace within. So when you meet someone struggling with their pain, do not rush to tell them to be strong. Do not try to fix them quickly. Just be there, silent and present. They will feel what you do not need to say, because sometimes Sincere presence can heal more than any advice. Now, I want to ask you, when someone comes to you in a moment of weakness, do you truly listen with your heart, or are you simply waiting for your turn to speak? Take a few seconds to reflect and write the answer quietly in your mind. Thank you for being here and for listening with the truth of your own presence. The practice of recognizing judgment early in the mind. Each day, within the endless stream of thoughts, our mind constantly makes conclusions. They form as fast as lightning in a fraction of a second before we even notice. A passing glance, a slightly raised voice, a clumsy gesture, and instantly the mind labels it right or wrong, good or bad, trustworthy or suspicious. It all happens quietly, like a reflex deeply wired into our system. That is how the brain protects us, but it is also how it locks the heart away from understanding. To practice empathy, we must begin at the very moment when judgment first arises, not to suppress it, but to see it. Recognition is the first step of transformation. When you notice a judging thought emerging, pause. Do not react. Do not justify. Just take a deep breath and ask yourself, where is this judgment coming from? From the present experience, or from an old wound still unhealed within me? You may be surprised to realize that most judgments we make about others mirror the things we once feared in ourselves. Someone lies, and we feel irritated because we once felt ashamed of being dishonest. Someone stays silent, and we grow impatient because we fear being abandoned. Judgment is always a two-way mirror. When we look deeply into it, we see our own cry for help, hiding behind the mask of reason. And only when we dare to observe it, that cry can be released. In the moment you recognize judgment forming, you have a choice. You can continue the familiar path, believe the story in your head, and close your heart. Or you can create a sacred pause. That pause is so small that no one else will notice, but its power can change the entire direction of the conversation. In that pause, you silently say within, maybe there is something I do not yet know. Maybe this person is carrying a pain I have not seen. The moment you ask that question, the energy inside you shifts. You are no longer the judge, but the observer. And from the observer, you become the one who understands. That is the first step toward freedom. For judgment binds while awareness liberates. When your mind learns to pause, your heart begins to open. Practicing early recognition of judgment is not about trying to be morally better. It is a journey of awareness. Each time you notice yourself judging, instead of blaming yourself, smile. Because that very awareness means you are awakening. You are no longer being pulled unconsciously. And each moment like that strengthens the muscle of patience, compassion, and inner light. Understanding others always begins with understanding yourself. If you have never seen how your mind builds a courtroom to condemn others, you will never know how to release those verdicts. Remember, every conversation is a test of consciousness. The person you meet does not come to be fixed, but to reflect what you need to recognize in yourself. When you understand this, you begin to live as a learner, not as a judge. To nurture this skill, take a few minutes each night to reflect on your day. Ask yourself, did I silently judge anyone today? What made me react that way? Write it down, but do not blame yourself. Just observe it as if you were watching a cloud drift by. Over time, those clouds will thin, and the sky within you will become clear again. When you begin to observe yourself, you will also observe the world differently. You will see that behind every unpleasant action is a wound seeking to be understood. And in that silence, you are learning to become light. Now, I want you to pause for a moment, take a deep breath, and feel. If you are ready to practice seeing judgment before it turns into words, if you want to learn to pause and choose understanding over reaction, write within your mind, or say quietly, I am ready to change. With one small decision, you have already begun your journey of transformation. Humility, as the key that unlocks understanding. Humility is not about lowering yourself. It is the art of stepping back just one step to see more clearly. And with that single step, your perspective changes. The same story, the same person, yet suddenly you see differently. Because now you are no longer standing on the platform of judgment, but sitting in the seat of a listener. Humility is the posture of an open mind. It does not need to win. It does not need to be right. It only needs to understand. There are times when we think we already know someone. We label them based on old memories and fleeting impressions, then unconsciously close our hearts. But a person is like a river, and that river never repeats itself. Each day the water changes. Each time we meet, they are no longer who they were yesterday. Humility reminds us that we are only seeing a small part of that flow, and what we do not know will always be greater than what we think we know. To understand another is not to decode them. It is to accept that there are places within them we do not need to conquer. There are fears, dreams, and wounds they can only reveal when they feel safe. And for them to feel safe, we must enter softly, with gentle hearts, and the humility of one who knows. They too are still learning. Humility does not take away dignity, it restores it for both sides. You may notice that the people who make you trust them are not the ones who are always right, but the ones who can say, "I do not fully understand yet, but I want to." Those words open the space for truth. They free the other person from the pressure to defend and free you from the need to control. In that space, ordinary conversations can become meetings of souls. Humility is also the willingness to admit that we have been wrong. Every time we dare to say, "I misjudged," we break the wall between ego and love. No one can truly empathize while constantly protecting a perfect image of themselves. Empathy comes when we have the courage to be bare, to not know, to allow others to teach us what we have not yet seen. In that moment, we step out of the safety of reason and touch the sacred ground of the heart. If you look closely, you will see that humility does not make you smaller, it makes you deeper. When you no longer need to prove, your words become lighter yet carry farther. When you no longer need to be right, your eyes become warmer, and people open up more easily around you. In that calm, you begin to see what you once missed, the other person's fear, the fragility behind their harsh words, and the hope hiding beneath their defenses. Humility is also respecting your own limits. There are times you cannot fully understand someone, and that is perfectly fine, because understanding is not about possession, it is about companionship. When you accept not knowing, you create space for miracles to happen. Often, it is within that very space that the other person finds their own answer without your guidance. And just the same, allow others the chance to understand you. Do not always play the role of the supporter. Humility is also allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to share, to need. When you let yourself be seen and known, you teach others to do the same. Connection flows only between two people who both know they are imperfect but are willing to understand each other. So whenever you feel yourself about to form a conclusion about someone, take one step back in your mind, breathe deeply, and remind yourself, maybe I have not seen it all. Maybe there is more in them I do not yet understand. Just that thought alone opens the door to truth, for truth only enters where there is space, and humility is that sacred space where clarity can come without being distorted by ego. Without humility, knowledge becomes a weapon, but with humility, even silence becomes a bridge. That is why Emmet Fox once said, "Clarity does not come from noise, but from the stillness of a humble heart." Think back to a time when someone listened to you without judgment, without correcting, simply looking at you with warmth and sincerity. How did it feel? Did you feel lighter, safer, more real? If your answer is yes, then you have touched the essence of humility, wordless yet powerful enough to melt every wall. The power of presence in the storm of emotions, amid the turbulence of life, when emotions surge like a storm, what a person needs is not advice, but a point of stillness. When someone is in pain, afraid, or angry, they do not need us to tell them what to do. They need to know they are not alone. And your steady presence, simply being there, can become the anchor that keeps their heart from drifting away. A person who can remain present in the storm is not emotionless. They simply know how to stand firm within emotion. They feel the pain but are not controlled by it. They hear the other's voice but do not lose themselves in it. They are there, whole and awake, like a candle standing in the wind without going out. That light may be small, but for someone lost in the night, it means everything. Presence is an energy that cannot be faked. You cannot pretend to be calm when turmoil fills your heart. Others will feel it instantly because our energy speaks before our words do. That is why, to bring stillness to others, you must first find the center of peace within yourself. It is not far away. It lives in your breath, in your heartbeat, in the moment you choose to pause before reacting. Every time you choose silence instead of argument, listening instead of winning the conversation, you are feeding that inner flame. Remember, true presence is not about stepping outside of life. It is about being in it while keeping clarity. When someone cries, you do not need to stop their tears. When they are angry, you do not need to force them to calm down. Just be there with them. Sometimes your silent presence speaks louder than 100 words of comfort, because in that moment they feel their pain is respected. And when pain is respected, it begins to heal. You may have experienced what it feels like to be listened to without interruption, without someone trying to pull you out of your emotion. They simply sit there with understanding in their eyes. No advice, no judgment, yet that presence alone makes you feel safe. That is the power of presence, the energy that reminds a person they are enough, they are accepted, and they do not need to hide. This power is quiet. It does not come from strong words, but from the silence that listens. Those who are truly present know when to speak and when to simply see. They understand that words have value only when they are born from stillness, not from fear or the need to prove. Presence also means not letting another's emotion carry you away. When someone is angry, they may say things that hurt. If you respond with anger, the storm doubles. But if you remain calm, you become the silent center, and your energy begins to soften the waves around you. This is the skill of mature empathy, to be with emotion without being ruled by it. It is not easy, because when others lose control, we are easily pulled in. But each time you remain steady, you plant a seed of peace for both. Your presence teaches the other that there is another way to live through the storm without breaking apart. Over time, they learn from your calm, not because you tell them, but because you are that calm. If you have ever lost your composure while someone else was angry, do not blame yourself. Just remember that each moment like that is a lesson, a chance to practice. Next time when the storm rises, take a deep breath and whisper within, I do not need to stop the storm. I only need to keep the light. When you hold that light, others will find their way home. Being present in the storm of emotions is an act of courage. Courage not because you are stronger, but because you dare to stay in the chaos without running away. You dare to face the emotion, both theirs and your own. And in those moments, you are not only helping them heal, but also healing yourself. Seeing through the surface of reaction, people often see only what is visible on the surface and forget that every reaction carries a hidden story. A cold look, a harsh tone, a distant attitude may seem like indifference, but inside there may be fear of being hurt, exhaustion, or old wounds that have never healed. Empathy begins when we are calm enough to pause and ask, what is really happening here? Seeing through the surface of reaction does not mean justifying every behavior. It means looking wider and deeper to see the whole picture before drawing conclusions. A person who raises their voice may not want to attack, but only wants to be heard. A person who withdraws into silence may not be uncaring, but gathering strength to avoid breaking down. When you look through the eyes of the heart, you begin to see the real human behind the defenses. And that is where true understanding begins. Each of us wears masks. They are not falsehoods. They are ways of surviving. Some hide pain with humor. Some hide fear with reason. Some hide emptiness with busyness. When we forget this, we mistake appearances for essence. But when we learn to observe without judgment, we start to understand that everyone is trying, however clumsily, to stay safe. Imagine standing before someone who is angry. The instinct is to defend, to argue, or to withdraw. But if you pause and look closer, you may see that behind the anger is fear of being dismissed, of not being heard. If you can stay calm enough to notice that, instead of reacting, you can say, I see this is hurting you deeply. Just one sentence like that can soften the storm. Because beneath every extreme emotion, people only want to know that their pain is real. Empathy does not ask you to accept wrong behavior, but it invites you to separate the person from the action. When you look at someone only through what they do, you trap them in their worst moment. But when you look deeper, you remind them and yourself that no one is defined forever by a single moment. They can change, and so can you. This takes mental practice. Each time you feel hurt by someone's words or actions, take a deep breath and ask yourself, if I do not react yet, what else can I see in this person? That question is not to deny your feelings, but to open a wider view. When you do that, you give yourself the chance to move from victim to observer, from reaction to awareness. Sometimes what you see will not be pretty. You may see someone so wounded that they only know how to wound others. You may see numbness, exhaustion, or a closed heart. But that seeing is the foundation of compassion, because only when you can see the pain, you understand why people act the way they do. And once you understand, judgment loses its grip. You can still hold boundaries, still say no, but there is no hatred inside you. Seeing through another's surface reaction is also seeing into yourself. Be honest, how many times have you reacted sharply because an old wound was touched? How many times have you been angry, not because someone was wrong, but because they reminded you of an old hurt? When you see that, you realize others are just like you, learning to heal through imperfect reactions. And that realization is the first step toward compassion. A heart that can see through the reactions of others is a heart that has learned stillness. Stillness is not indifference. It is space wide enough to hold both your emotions and theirs without being drowned by either. When you can hold that space, you become someone others can lean on, not because you have advice, but because you are safe. In a world full of tension, someone who can see through the surface of reaction becomes a light in the dark. They remind others that behind anger lies fear, behind silence lies the longing to be understood, and behind every wall there is still a beating heart. And when you learn to see with those eyes, you begin to see others more clearly, and you also begin to see yourself in them, cultivating patience and sensitivity to subtle signals. True understanding never happens in haste. It is the result of a mind that knows how to slow down and a heart that knows how to listen to what has not been said. People do not always express their emotions in words. Sometimes the truest things appear in a pause, in a broken breath, in an averted gaze that lasts half a second. To see those things, you need two qualities working together, patience and sensitivity. One keeps you from rushing, the other keeps you from becoming numb. Patience is the strength of someone who trusts the natural rhythm of the soul. You cannot force a flower to bloom faster, nor can you make someone open their heart before they are ready. If you truly want to understand another person, give them time. Sometimes silence at the beginning is not rejection, but a search for safety. If you are patient enough to wait, to sit nearby without demanding, you are sending a signal that says, I am here when you are ready. That signal is more powerful than any promise. Sensitivity is the ability to sense the subtle energy that exists between two people. When you are silent and fully present, you begin to hear the things that are not spoken. Someone may smile while their eyes look tired. Someone may tell a story in a steady tone while their hands tremble. Someone may say, I am fine, while their breath is shallow. Those signals never lie. When you learn to see, to listen, to feel with your whole being, you begin to read the invisible language of the heart. This sensitivity does not come from technique, but from purity of mind. A mind filled with judgment hears everything through a distorted lens. But when you let go of control, when you truly wish to understand rather than to win, you begin to feel what others feel, not through logic, but through the intuition of compassion. That is when you stop reading people and start touching them softly, like a breeze. There are moments when your quiet presence alone can make someone cry, not because of anything you said, but because they can feel you are truly there with them. Those tears are signs that trust has opened. And to create that, you need patience, like a gardener waiting for a seed to sprout, not digging or rushing, only tending with steady warmth. When you cultivate both patience and sensitivity, life around you begins to change. You react less. You are less pulled by the emotions of others. You start to notice that every conversation has its own rhythm, and you do not need to control it. You become the keeper of rhythm, never hurried, never detached, simply ready to listen when the time comes. The modern world teaches people to move fast, speak fast, and decide fast, but the soul does not move at that pace. It needs time to open, to trust, to reveal. Those who know how to live slowly, to wait, to listen with their hearts, are the rare ones who still preserve their humanity in this noisy age. If you want to cultivate patience and sensitivity, start by slowing down when you talk. Do not rush to answer. Do not hurry to give advice. Let the other person finish and allow silence to exist between you. That silence is not empty. It is where truth often appears. And when you listen, do not only listen with your ears, listen with your eyes, your skin, your breath. Feel the energy they radiate. Notice how the space shifts. Let your intuition guide you, for the heart always knows what the mind has not yet understood. If you practice this every day, you will notice something beautiful. The world around you becomes softer. People begin to trust more, to open more, and you will feel more at peace, no longer needing to guess or to push. When your heart becomes sensitive, you will realize that love has always been there. You just used to move too fast to notice it. Now I invite you to pause for a moment, take a deep breath, and if you truly wish to cultivate this subtle awareness, make a quiet promise to yourself, I am ready to change. That simple sentence is the first step of someone learning to see more deeply, to listen more fully, and to live more gently with compassion, avoiding the tendency to project your story onto others. Each of us carries a movie within, where every scene, every sound, every memory shapes the way we see the world. When we meet someone, we rarely see them as they truly are. We see them through the lens of our own story. A single word may awaken a past memory. A familiar gesture may reopen an old wound, and suddenly we are no longer reacting to the person before us, but to the echo of our past. This is where empathy is easily lost, when we stop hearing others and begin listening only to the version of them that exists in our mind. Avoiding the projection of our own story onto others is a lesson in awareness. It requires recognizing that every judgment we make, no matter how subtle, passes through filters of experience, fear, belief, and expectation. When we fail to see this, we unknowingly turn every conversation into a stage for our inner narrative. We listen to respond, not to understand. We seek confirmation for what we already believe, instead of being curious about what the other person is truly experiencing. To truly understand another, we must learn to step back from our own story. In a conversation, when someone says something that triggers discomfort, instead of reacting, ask yourself, what is this touching within me? Why do I feel hurt, dismissed, or threatened? That question not only calms you, but also opens the door to deeper awareness. Because sometimes the other person has done nothing wrong. They have only touched an unhealed wound you still carry. We often want others to understand us, but rarely see that we too must learn to understand them without forcing them into our frame. When you say, if it were me, I would have done it differently, you are unconsciously turning your experience into a standard for theirs. But the truth is, you are not them. You do not carry their memories, fears, dreams, or context. Every soul has its own journey. When you truly understand this, you stop expecting others to react, to love, to forgive, or to grow in the same way you did. This does not mean abandoning boundaries or accepting every behavior. It means knowing the difference between understanding and merging. You can disagree and still understand. You can set limits and still remain kind. The strength of maturity is not in making others act as you wish, but in keeping compassion even when they are different from you. There is a truth many avoid facing. Every time we rush to advise or react, We are often trying to heal ourselves more than to help the other. We do not want them to make the same mistakes we made, or to hurt as we once did, so we try to shape them. But hidden in that impulse is fear, the fear of seeing our own wound reflected in them. When you see that, you soften. You realize your task is not to fix, but to be present, not to control, but to bear witness to their journey. If you truly want to help someone, start by giving them the right to be themselves. Let them make mistakes, fall, and rise in their own way. That respect has greater healing power than any advice, because everyone needs space to experience, to learn, to awaken in their own rhythm. When you stop imprisoning others within your story, you are giving them freedom, and at the same time you are freeing yourself from the exhausting role of the savior. True love is not pulling someone toward you, but standing still and shining so they can find their way back to themselves. You do not need to hold their hand the entire way. Just keep your light steady and let it illuminate their path. When you honor another's journey, you are telling them through your energy, I trust you are strong enough to find your own way. In that moment, love ceases to be pity and becomes sacred respect, because empathy is not merging, but being fully present in difference. It is the love of one who knows that every soul is on its own journey home and we are merely companions, not guides. Now I want to ask you, how many times have you unknowingly imposed your story on someone thinking it would help them? How many times have you felt tired from trying to fix someone to make them more like you? If you recognize that, take a deep breath and say quietly, I choose to let others be themselves. Thank you, because in the moment you release your expectations, the world around you begins to heal too. Breaking the habit of quick conclusions, perhaps within each of us lives an invisible judge, always eager to deliver a verdict. Just one look, one tone, one small detail, and the mind rushes to build a complete story. We believe we have understood, that we have grasped the essence, yet in truth, we are only reflecting our own fears and memories. The habit of drawing quick conclusions is the silent thief of empathy. It makes us listen without truly hearing and look without truly seeing. In conversation, sometimes the other person has only spoken half a sentence, and we already think we know what they are going to say. We interrupt, we react, we defend our point. In that moment, the door to understanding closes. Every rushed conclusion comes from the fear of uncertainty. The mind hates the unknown, it hates waiting, it hates not knowing, so it fills the gaps with assumptions. The danger is, those assumptions are often wrong, and when we believe them, we begin to act as if they were true. Breaking this habit is not about stopping thought, but about adding a sacred pause between what we perceive and how we respond. Each time you are about to react, take a deep breath. Acknowledge that you may not fully understand. Ask yourself, am I really listening? Am I seeing this person through today's eyes or through my old memories? That single moment of healthy doubt is where wisdom begins. When you allow yourself to not know, you open the space for true understanding to enter. Just as water reflects the sky only when it is still, the mind can only see truth when it stops rushing. Many conflicts could be resolved if one person paused for 5 seconds before reacting. Those 5 seconds can be the difference between hurt and healing, between distance and connection. Slowing down your thinking does not make you weak. It makes you more deliberate. When you are no longer pulled by reflex, you begin to master yourself. You see emotions come and go without being carried away. You listen without losing yourself. And in that calm, the other person feels that you are truly hearing them, not just waiting for your turn to speak. To practice this, try it in simple daily conversations. When someone says something that stirs disagreement, stay silent for a moment. Look at them, take a long breath, and let their words hang in the air for a few seconds. You will notice something powerful. That silence does not make you smaller, it makes you stronger. Because when people feel fully heard, they begin to open their hearts to hear you in return. The habit of quick conclusions affects not only our relationships with others, but also the way we see ourselves. We label ourselves too soon. I failed. I am not enough. I am not good at this. we do not give ourselves the chance to change. And so we turn a single mistake into a lifelong sentence. Learning to slow down is also learning to forgive yourself. Living slowly in your judgments is learning to respect the process, to understand that everything takes time to reveal its truth. Not understanding someone today does not mean they are unworthy of being understood. Just as not being understood today does not mean you are unworthy of love. When you learn to wait, the truth naturally appears. Like mud settling at the bottom, the water becomes clear. And when you live this way, others begin to feel safe around you. They know you will not rush to judge, will not hurry to conclude, will not use your words as a verdict. They can simply be themselves. And in that slowness, you begin to see what you once missed, the quiet beauty of each soul unfolding at its own rhythm. Now, before we close, I want to ask you one thing. When someone says something you disagree with, do you really listen until the end, or are you already building your answer in your mind? If you realize you have done this, smile and know that you are learning to understand before concluding, learning to see with the eyes of the heart, not the eyes of judgment. Thank you for pausing, for listening, and for allowing that sacred space to exist, because it is within that pause that the wisdom of compassion is born, the humility before the imperfection of perception. No one can see the whole picture of life, not even ourselves. Each of us holds only a fragment, a viewpoint, an experience, a piece of memory. When we forget this, we easily mistake our perception for absolute truth, yet every perception is limited. It is colored by our personal history, our beliefs, our fears, and the wounds we have not yet healed. Understanding this is the first step toward humility in wisdom, a state both clear and gentle. Humility does not mean doubting yourself. It means knowing that you do not know everything. It is the ability to admit that sometimes you misunderstood, sometimes you need to listen again, sometimes someone else may be more right than you. A humble mind does not resist new truth. It is like an open field, ready to receive the rain without fearing to lose its shape. In contrast, a proud mind is a closed wall, always protecting its own version of knowing, and therefore never truly learns. There is a quiet strength in this humility. Those who truly understand do not speak much and do not rush to prove. They listen with sincere curiosity. They ask to learn rather than to argue. Every conversation for them is an opportunity to widen their view, and that openness makes them easy to be around because everyone near them feels respected and seen. Think of a time when you misjudged someone. Perhaps you formed an opinion based on appearance or a few actions, and time later proved you wrong. That feeling, both humbling and clarifying, is the mark of growth. Only the humble can admit they were mistaken, and only those who can admit mistakes are capable of true change. Each time you say, "I was wrong about this," you shed another layer of ego and let the light of truth shine through. Humility in perception also frees us from the suffering of control. We no longer need people to think like us, or the world to move according to our logic. We learn to trust the larger process, where everything is unfolding at its own rhythm. We may not understand why someone acts a certain way, but we can trust that behind their actions lies a lesson, a reason, a current that our present mind has not yet reached. That trust is not blind faith, but the surrender of a heart that knows its limits. When you know you do not know it all, you stop fearing difference. You no longer need to defend yourself when someone disagrees. You simply listen. And in that listening, you begin to see that beneath every differing opinion lies the same longing to be understood, to be loved, to be at peace. When we see that shared longing, division begins to dissolve. Humility also teaches us something precious. Truth does not need our protection. Truth has its own light, and it will shine whether or not we speak. When we stop trying to prove, our words become clearer. When we no longer need to win, we begin to understand. The world does not need more people who are always right. It needs more people who can listen with humility. And you will notice, when the heart becomes humble, every relationship grows lighter. We no longer argue to win, but to connect. We no longer listen to reply, but to understand. The ego softens, leaving space for truth to emerge. In that space, we not only learn about others, but also about ourselves. Because each time we release a judgment, we take one step closer to the clear essence of who we truly are. If there is one reminder to carry with you, let it be this: I do not need to know it all. I only need to be ready to learn. For the humble are never poor in knowledge, they are rich in light. The kind of light born from the faith that every encounter has something to teach us. The mirror of our shared humanity. When you look deeply into another person, you begin to realize something simple yet profound. We all carry the same story. Though our forms, languages, and circumstances may differ, within each of us live the same emotions: fear, longing, regret, the desire to be loved and to be understood. We think we are alone in our pain, but in truth, every human being is learning the same lessons: how to love and how to understand. If you have ever felt tired, lonely, or misunderstood, remember that somewhere millions of hearts are feeling the same. When we know this, we no longer see ourselves as separate, but as part of a great river called humanity. This river flows through every person, carrying all the memories, joys, and wounds of our kind. Each time we learn to have compassion for someone, we are not only healing a relationship, we are healing the human spirit within ourselves. Recognizing our shared humanity does not lessen our individuality. It lightens the burden of comparison. When we see that everyone carries their own contradictions, we judge less. When we realize that everyone has been afraid, we become gentler. And when we understand that everyone is trying, we begin to care instead of criticize. From there, compassion begins to rise like sunlight breaking through clouds, soft yet powerful. Think for a moment: the person who irritates you most has probably also known loss, misunderstanding, and the longing to be loved. The person you envy may have faced the same fears and doubts you carry. The one who hurt you may simply be repeating the pain they once endured. When you see yourself in them, you step away from judgment and into understanding. When we recognize that all people share the same essence, our emotions shift from resistance to connection. The soul is like a mirror. The clearer it becomes, the more beauty it reflects. Each time we forgive, the mirror grows brighter. Each time we love, the mirror expands. Gradually, we begin to see our own face in the face of humanity. That is when compassion becomes effortless, no longer a practice, but a natural breath. Living in that awareness, we no longer need to prove our worth by being above anyone. Someone else's success no longer diminishes us. It becomes evidence of human potential. When we see others happy, we rejoice as if it were our own joy. When we see others in pain, we do not turn away, for we know that pain is also ours. True empathy does not divide. It dissolves all division. If the world needs anything most, it is to see each other through the eyes of our shared humanity. When you live in that awareness, every act, a kind word, a gentle gesture, a non-judgmental look, becomes a seed planted in another heart. Over time, those seeds bloom into gardens of compassion. You can begin today simply by observing someone you do not understand or like and asking yourself, if I had lived what they have lived, would I really be any different? That question dissolves the fog of judgment and reveals the quiet truth: we are not so different after all. So if you are hearing these words, I invite you to pause for a moment and look around your world, your family, your co-workers, strangers on the street, and realize that each of them reflects a part of you. If you see someone in pain, send them a kind thought. If you see someone succeed, send them a silent blessing. And now, I invite you to do one small but meaningful thing. Leave in your mind, or in the comments if you wish, a sign of your presence. It could be the words, I am ready to change, or simply the number 1. It is a quiet declaration that you are choosing to see the world through the eyes of compassion, choosing to be a mirror that reflects light instead of shadow. Thank you, because every time you choose love over judgment, you are changing the world, even if only by a single breath, untying the knots of emotion. In every relationship, there are moments when we feel heavy without knowing why. A small word can wound us deeply. A short silence can make us feel abandoned. These are signs that emotional knots have begun to form between us and the other person, woven from misunderstandings, unspoken words, expectations, and unseen fears. These knots are not created in a day, and they cannot be undone by a single apology. They require patience, compassion, and a heart willing to listen. To untie does not mean to forget or to deny. It means to gently loosen, like holding a tangled string. If you pull hard, it only tightens. But when you patiently work each loop apart, the tension begins to ease. Relationships are the same. The more we insist on being right, the more we rush to resolve things, the further apart we become. Only when we stop, breathe, and look into the pain of both sides can softness begin to enter. The first step to untying is recognition. Ask yourself, what is truly hurting me? Is it the words they said or the feeling of being dismissed? Is it their action or an old fear within me that has been touched? When you see the source of your emotion clearly, you realize that most tension does not begin with others, but with the parts of yourself that remain unhealed. And the moment you dare to look, you have already loosened the first knot. The second step is to communicate calmly, not through blame. Instead of saying, "You hurt me," try saying, "When that happened, I felt hurt." It sounds small, but it carries a completely different energy. It does not accuse, it reveals. It does not build walls, it opens doors. The listener does not need to defend, and truth has space to emerge. When you speak from the heart, you teach the other person how to return to theirs. The third step is to understand the process. Not everyone can face emotions at the same time as you. Some need time to trust, some need silence to reflect. When you wait with patience, you are planting seeds of safety. Over time, through conversations and quiet presence, the tangled strings begin to loosen. They may never disappear entirely, but they will no longer choke the connection. Most importantly, as you untie the knots with others, you are also untying yourself. Each time you release a resentment, your heart expands. Each time you forgive, you free yourself from the weight of memory. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is no longer wishing to retaliate against old pain. When you stop searching for fault, your mind returns to peace. And where there is peace, love can flow again. Sometimes the knot does not exist between two people, but entirely within us. Old wounds, words left unsaid, sadness buried deep. Take time to listen to your own heart. Write it down, cry if you must, and tell yourself, "I allow myself to be lighter." When you release the weight within, the relationships outside, you will begin to change as well. Remember, untying is an art of gentleness. You cannot heal through tension. Healing happens through stillness, patience, and kindness. The other person may not be ready to understand you yet, but if you can remain at peace, you have already walked half the way. Every emotional knot dissolves before the quiet power of genuine love. When you dare to untie, you are telling life, "I choose connection over separation. I choose love over pain." And that choice is what sets you free. So when a relationship feels heavy, do not rush to walk away. Pause, breathe, and look for the thread that binds the two hearts. Perhaps all it needs is a gentle word, a soft touch, or a silence long enough for the knot to loosen on its own. Because what truly hurts us is not our differences, but the lack of understanding between two hearts that we're always trying to reach each other. Hearing what is not said. In every conversation, between the words spoken, there exists an invisible space, a place that holds all the things left unspoken. It may contain fear of being hurt, hesitation to reveal vulnerability, or emotions that have not yet found their way into words. Hearing what is not said is the art of patience and sensitivity, where you listen not only with your ears but also with your heart. People do not communicate through words alone. The voice, the eyes, the breath, the movement of the hands, even the subtle shift in the air, all are languages of the soul. When someone says, "I'm fine," but their eyes turn away, their voice trembles, or their breath breaks, you can sense the waves beneath the surface. A true listener pays attention not only to what is spoken, but also to what is trying to stay hidden. Hearing what is not said does not mean reading minds or interpreting. It means keeping your inner space open so that what has not yet been expressed can safely emerge. like a quiet room where even the faintest whisper can be heard. When you are fully present, without pressure or interruption, the other person begins to feel safe. And when they feel safe, what they could not say before begins to find its voice. Sometimes another's silence is not a gap for you to fill with advice. It is a space where truth is finding its way out. If you rush to fill it, you may interrupt that process. Those who hear what is not said know how to honor silence, like a patient guardian waiting for a guest to arrive. You do not push, you wait. You do not pull, you simply stay present. It is important to understand that hearing what is not said requires inner adjustment. If your own mind is noisy, you will hear nothing but its echo. So before listening to someone else, listen to yourself. Breathe deeply, feel your body, release the spinning thoughts. When you are truly present, your mind becomes like a still lake, reflecting everything clearly without distortion. Pay attention to tone and rhythm. Someone holding back emotion may speak slowly or pause often. Someone afraid may laugh nervously or change the subject. Someone in pain may look as if they want to speak but stop halfway. Each small sign is a door leading to the deeper layers within them. But that door can only be opened with respect, not curiosity. When you ask to understand, not to judge, the answers will come. Sometimes as words, sometimes as a nod, sometimes as tears. Listening to what is not said is also a lesson in trust. Trust that the other person has the capacity to understand themselves. Trust that you do not need to fix them. Your role is to hold space, not to direct. They may not be ready to speak today, but the seed of openness has been planted, and when the time is right, their truth will find its way to the light. Remember, sometimes people cannot speak, not because they do not want to, but because they have not yet found the language for their pain. Their silence may be their way of crying for help. When you are sensitive enough to see that, a soft touch or a calm gaze can become the bridge that helps them step out of the dark. Listening to what is not said is a journey of compassion. To truly hear, you must quiet the part of you that wants to speak, fix, or prove. You must step back and give space for the other to exist as they are. And in that space, something miraculous happens. When people are allowed to be themselves, they begin to find their own answers. You do not need to speak, because your presence itself becomes the answer. So if today you meet someone who is silent, do not try to make them talk. Just sit beside them quietly, like a candle that burns without sound. You may never know what is happening inside them, but they will remember that someone was gentle enough to stay without asking, without rushing, simply listening. And sometimes that is the greatest gift one human being can give another, responding with clarity, not from the ego. There is a fine line between reaction and response. Reaction comes from the ego, fast, forceful, and often charged with defense. Response arises from clarity, slow, calm, and guided by the wisdom of compassion. Most conflicts in life do not begin with what people say, but with how we react to what they say. When we learn to respond from clarity, we can turn an argument into a dialogue and a conflict into an opportunity to understand each other more deeply. The ego always wants to win. It whispers, prove that you are right, protect your image. But clarity is different. Clarity does not seek victory. It seeks to understand what truly matters. When you react to defend your ego, you may feel satisfied for a moment, but the relationship will suffer. When you respond from clarity, you may pause for a few seconds, but you protect something far more precious, the connection between two hearts. Reaction comes from fear. Response comes from peace. When someone says something that hurts you, emotions rise like waves. If you let the waves control you, your words will become weapons. But if you stop, breathe, and ask yourself, what outcome do I really want from this conversation? You are shifting from instinct to awareness. When the mind becomes spacious, wisdom begins to guide you. And under the light of that wisdom, your voice becomes softer but stronger than ever. Responding with clarity does not mean you are always silent or always yielding. It means you choose the right moment and the right way. There are times to speak and times when silence is far more powerful. There are things that need to be said now, and things that should wait until emotions have settled. Clarity helps you know when your heart is ready to speak without causing harm. Remember, not everything you think needs to be said, but once words are spoken, they can never return. So let every word pass through the filter of kindness. Ask yourself, is this necessary? Will it help the other person understand me better? Or am I just trying to prove I am right? If the answer is unclear, wait, because silence born from clarity is stronger than 1,000 words spoken from ego. Clarity is not only in what you say, but in the energy you bring into the conversation. If your heart is tense, even gentle words will carry thorns. But when your heart is calm, even firm words will carry care. This energy makes the difference between a person who argues and a person who heals. You will notice that when you learn to respond from clarity, people begin to change the way they speak to you. A calm voice is contagious. It softens storms of words. It invites others to lower their tone. And in that quiet space, truth finally has a chance to be heard. There is one important skill of a clear mind. It does not need an immediate answer. If you are not ready to respond, you can simply say, I need some time to think. It sounds simple, but it is a sign of emotional mastery. It gives you the power to choose wisdom over reaction. The ego tells you that silence means weakness. But in truth, only those who are strong can stay silent when needed. Silence is not losing, it is protecting the relationship, yourself, and the other person. Because in the end, clarity is not about being right. It is about keeping kindness in every word. Words born from clarity do not divide, they heal. They do not defend, they open. They do not wound, they remind others that they too can be gentle. And now, before we close, I want to ask you one thing. The last time you argued with someone, did you speak from your ego or from your clarity? If you realize that you once reacted too quickly, smile. Realization is the first step of awakening. Thank you for being here, for listening with your heart and not your instinct. Each time you choose to respond with clarity, you plant a seed of peace in the world, holding space for transformation and the art of healthy boundaries. There is a kind of love that is quiet, undemanding, and free of control, the love that knows how to hold space. When you hold space for someone, you do not try to change them, you do not rush to pull them out of their darkness. You simply stay, like a gentle light that softly illuminates their path. Because true transformation can only arise from within, and the most powerful thing you can do for another soul is to create a safe space where they can bloom on their own. Those who know how to hold space understand that no one can be forced to grow. Every soul has its own rhythm, its own lessons, and its own time to unfold. Even when disguised as care, impatience is still a form of control. When you tell someone they must understand, must change, must do better, you unknowingly take away their chance to see themselves. Holding space is the humility of love, knowing that you are not the savior, only the companion. To truly hold space, you must master one essential skill, the art of healthy boundaries. Many people mistake empathy for carrying the pain of others, being available at all times, or giving until exhaustion. But that is not kindness, that is self-erasure. Genuine compassion always walks hand in hand with boundaries. Only when you remain grounded can you be a safe place for others to rest. A healthy boundary is not a wall, it is a line. That line helps you know how far you can give and where you need to rest. When you say, I need a moment to recharge, you are not being selfish, you are honoring yourself so that your love can last. A tree that wishes to give shade must also draw nourishment from the soil. If it dries up, its shade will vanish too. Remember, you cannot heal others by hurting yourself. When you are drained, you lose the clarity to love. When you are exhausted, compassion turns into resentment. So sometimes love means stepping back at the right time, not to abandon, but to keep your inner flame alive. Those who can step back and still love are the ones who have truly matured emotionally. Holding space also requires deep trust. Trust in the other person's strength to find their own way. When you give them the freedom to grow, you are silently telling them, I believe in you. That belief is the most powerful medicine, because often what people need is not a saving hand, but a calm gaze. that says, I know you are strong enough to rise. You may witness someone you love make mistakes, fall, or go in circles. You may want to step in to guide them, to fix things for them. But remember, every soul awakens through its own encounters. If you protect them from every fall, you also protect them from their growth. Stand nearby, steady and kind, trusting their journey. True love does not control, it gives freedom. Holding space for transformation is not only for others, it is also a gift you give yourself. When you stop trying to carry everything, your heart becomes lighter. When you stop trying to fix the world, you begin to find balance within. Then you realize that your stillness itself becomes an invitation for others to find their own peace. Transformation is rarely a grand moment. It is a quiet process, happening in small conversations, in long silences, in moments when you choose to listen instead of advise. You may never know exactly when someone changes, but your energy, your peace, patience, and trust will stay with them far longer than any words. When you learn the art of holding space, you become someone others can breathe around. They do not fear being judged, rushed, or told to be perfect. They can simply be, and in that being, the miracle of healing begins. To hold space for transformation is the lesson of mature love, love that does not demand results or recognition. It only knows that every moment you show up in peace, the world around you quietly begins to heal too. Living as an example of understanding. Words can touch the mind, but only the way we live can touch the soul. Understanding is not a concept to discuss. It is a way of being shown through how we look, how we listen, how we respond, and even in how we remain silent. When you live with understanding, you do not need to preach about kindness, for people can feel it through your gestures, your eyes, and the way you move through life. To live as an example of understanding is to choose to become a vessel of peace, not because you have never been hurt, but because you have learned to walk with your pain gently. You do not try to be perfect. You simply choose not to cause further harm. Each time you stay silent instead of arguing, smile instead of judging, or listen instead of reacting, you are sending a message stronger than any speech. Understanding is real, and it can be lived. Those who live with understanding do not try to appear virtuous. They simply choose what is right over what is easy. When misunderstood, they choose calm explanation over anger. When hurt, they choose forgiveness over revenge. When facing someone's weakness, they choose compassion over contempt. These small choices, repeated day after day, build the strength of character. You may not realize it, but every act of kindness you offer plants a seed in the collective consciousness. A gentle look, a soft word, a moment spent listening to someone in pain, all of it creates ripples. People may forget what you said, but they will never forget how peaceful they felt around you. And that feeling someday will inspire them to treat others more gently. To live as an example does not mean to be flawless. In fact, it includes the honesty of your own humanness. When you can say, I was wrong, I lost my patience, I am still learning to love, you give others permission to do the same. You show that growth is not about never falling, but about daring to look within each time you do. That honesty is one of the greatest teachers, because it shows that humility is the path to real strength. Understanding lies not in grand gestures, but in small daily choices, in how you greet someone with warmth, in how you listen without interrupting, in how you set your phone aside when someone is speaking, in how you refrain from retaliation even when you could. These small acts accumulate into an atmosphere of kindness, and where kindness dwells, people naturally begin to rise into their better selves. Sometimes you will not see the results right away. You will wonder, does what I do even matter? Does my gentleness make any difference? But know this, no act of goodness is ever lost. You may not be there to witness it, but somewhere, sometime, a seed you planted today will bloom. Someone will remember how you treated them and will choose to treat another the same way. That is how the circle of understanding keeps expanding, beyond your sight, but never beyond your reach. Living as an example of understanding also means being true to yourself. You cannot offer peace if you are at war within. Take time to nurture your inner world. Breathe, Listen to your body. Observe your thoughts. Each time you return to yourself, you are polishing your own mirror so that your light can shine more clearly into the world. A world of understanding will not be built through speeches, but through people like you, those who choose to live slowly, deeply, and sincerely. As you walk through life, you do not need many words, only a clear heart. Every loving action, no matter how small, becomes a living prayer for peace. And now, before we close this journey, remember this: you are the living proof of understanding, not because you are perfect, but because you keep trying. Not because you know everything, but because you remain open to learning. Keep living as a mirror, not for others to see themselves in you, but to remind them of their own light. Because when you live this way, you do not just transform your own life, you awaken the goodness sleeping in the hearts of others.